Om Jnanatimmirandasya Jananjana Shalakaya Chakshulunmilitam Jena Tajmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Jena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Karamaya Dadati Swapadantikam. I was born in the darkest of ignorance, but my spiritual masters have opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my respectful obeisances unto them. When will Srila Rupa Goswami Prabhupada, who is established within this material world, the mission to fulfill the desire of Lord Chaitanya, give me shelter at his lotus feet? All right. So, reading from the Bhagavad-gita as it is by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Chapter 6, Sankhya Yoga. Text 1. The Blessed Lord said, "One who is unattached to the fruits of his work and who works as he is obligated is in the renounced order of life. And he is the true mystic, not he who lights no fire and performs no work." What is called renunciation is the same as yoga, or linking oneself with the Supreme. For no one can become a yogi unless he renounces the desire for sense gratification. For one who is a neophyte in the eightfold yoga system, work is said to be the means. And for one who has already attained to yoga, cessation of all material activities is said to be the means. A person is said to have attained yoga when, having renounced all material desires, he neither acts for sense gratification nor engages in fruitive activities. A man must elevate himself by his own mind, not degrade himself. The mind is the friend of the conditioned soul and his enemy as well. For him who has conquered the mind is the best of friends. But for one who has failed to do so, his very mind will be the greatest enemy. For one who has conquered the mind, the supersoul is already reached, for he has attained tranquility. To such a man, happiness and distress, heat and cold, honor and dishonor are all the same. A person is said to be established in self-realization and called a yogi or mystic when he is fully satisfied by virtue of acquired knowledge and realization. Such a person is situated in transcendence and is self-controlled. He sees everything, whether it be pebbles, stones, or gold, as the same. A person is said to be still further advanced when he regards all, the honest well-wisher, friends and enemies, the envious, the pious, and the sinner, and those who are indifferent and impartial with an equal mind. A transcendentalist should always try to concentrate his mind on the Supreme Self. He should live alone in a secluded place and should always carefully control his mind. He should be free from the desires and feelings of possessiveness. To practice yoga, one should go to a secluded place and should lay down kusa grass on the ground and then cover it with a deer skin and a soft cloth. The seat should neither be too high nor too low and should be situated in a sacred place. The yogi should then sit on it very firmly and should practice yoga by controlling the mind and the senses, purifying the heart, and fixing his mind on one point. One should hold one's body, neck, and head erect in a straight line and stare steadily at the tip of the nose. Thus, with an unagitated, subdued mind, devoid of fear, completely free from sex life, one should meditate upon me within the heart and make me the ultimate goal of life. Thus, practicing control of the body, mind, and activities, the mystic transcendentalist attains the kingdom of God, or the abode of Krishna, by cessation of material existence. There is no possibility of one's becoming a yogi, O Arjuna, if one eats too much or eats too little, sleeps too much or does not sleep enough. He who is temperate in his habits of eating, sleeping, working, and recreation can mitigate all material pains by practicing the yoga system. When the yogi, by practice of yoga, disciplines his mental activities and becomes situated in transcendence, devoid of all material desires, he is said to have attained yoga. As a lamp in a windless place does not waver, so the transcendentalist, whose mind is controlled, remains always steady in his meditation on the transcendent self. This stage of perfection is called trance or samadhi, when one's mind is completely restrained from material mental activities by practice of yoga. This is characterized by one's ability to see the self by the pure mind and to relish and rejoice in the self. In that joyous state, one is situated in boundless transcendental happiness and enjoys himself through transcendental senses. Established thus, one never departs from the truth, and upon gaining this, he thinks there is no greater gain. Being situated in such a position, one is never shaken, even in the midst of greatest difficulty. This indeed is actual freedom from all miseries arising from material contact. One should engage oneself in practice of yoga with undeviating determination and faith. One should abandon without exception all material desires born of false ego, and thus control all the senses on all sides by the mind. Gradually, step by step, with full conviction, one should become situated in trance by means of intelligence, and thus the mind should be fixed on the self alone and should think of nothing else. From whatever and wherever the mind wanders due to its flickering and unsteady nature, one must certainly withdraw it and bring it back under the control of the self. The yogi whose mind is fixed on me verily attains the highest happiness. By virtue of his identity with Brahman, he is liberated. His mind is peaceful, and his passions are quieted, and he is freed from sin. Steady in the self, being freed from all material contamination, the yogi achieves the highest perfectional stage of happiness in touch with the supreme consciousness. A true yogi observes me in all beings and also sees every being in me. Indeed, the self-realized man sees me everywhere. For one who sees me everywhere and sees everything in me, I am never lost, nor is he ever lost to me. The yogi who knows that I and the supersoul within all creatures are the one, worships me and remains always in me in all circumstances. He is a perfect yogi who, by comparison to his own self, sees the true equality of all beings, both in their happiness and distress, O Arjuna. Arjuna said, O Madhusudan, the system of yoga which you have summarized appears impractical and unendurable to me, for the mind is restless and unsteady. For the mind is restless, turbulent, obstinate, and very strong, O Krishna. And to subdue it is, it seems to me, more difficult than controlling the wind. The Blessed Lord said, O mighty armed son of Kunti, it is undoubtedly very difficult to control the restless mind, but it is possible by constant practice and by detachment. For one whose mind is unbridled, self-realization is difficult work, but he whose mind is controlled and who strives by right means is assured of success. That is my opinion. Arjuna said, what is the destination of a man of faith who does not persevere, who in the beginning takes to the process of self-realization, but who later desists due to worldly mindedness and thus does not attain perfection in mysticism? Excuse me. O mighty armed Krishna, Does not such a man, being deviated from the path of transcendence, perish like a riven cloud, with no position in any sphere? This is my doubt, O Krishna, and I ask you to dispel it completely. But for yourself, no one is to be found who can destroy this doubt. The Blessed Lord said, O son of Pritha, a transcendentalist engaged in auspicious activities does not meet with destruction, either in this world or in the spiritual world. One who does good, my friend, is never overcome by evil. The unsuccessful yogi, after many, many years of enjoyment on the planets of the pious living entities, is born again into a family of righteous people or into a family of rich aristocracy. Or he takes birth in a family of transcendentalists who are surely great in wisdom. Verily, such a birth is rare in this world. On taking such a birth, he again revives his divine consciousness of his previous life, and he tries to make further progress in order to achieve complete success, O son of Kuru. By virtue of the divine consciousness of his previous life, he automatically becomes attached to the yoga principles, even without seeking them. Such an inquisitive transcendentalist, striving for yoga, stands always above the ritualistic principles of the scriptures. But when the yogi engages himself with sincere endeavor in making further progress, being washed of all contamination, then ultimately, after many, many births of practice, he attains the supreme goal. A yogi is greater than the ascetic, greater than the empiricist, and greater than the fruit worker. Therefore, O Arjuna, in all circumstances, be a yogi. And of all yogis, he who always abides in me with great faith, worshiping me in transcendental loving service, is most intimately united with me in yoga and is the highest of all. Wow, nice, yeah? 6th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita is one of my favorites. So let's go back and kind of take a deeper dive. So Krishna continues the conversation from the 5th chapter, Karma Yoga, by reiterating the fact that one has to act in this world. If you have a material body, you have to do certain things. You have certain responsibilities, certain obligations. You have to maintain the body. So it requires a certain amount of work and activity. Now, normally this work of maintaining the body binds one through the laws of karma. And then because of that, one continually suffers through the cycle of birth, death, old age, and disease. But there is a way out. And the way out is to, instead of acting for the self, to dedicate all of one's activities to the service of Krishna. You do the same things. You still maintain the body. You still go out and acquire wealth. You still relate to different living entities. But the focus is what's different. The example is often given that when you're born in this world, according to your karma, you're given certain talents and certain abilities. You may have a certain amount of intelligence, you have a certain amount of beauty, a certain amount of wealth, a certain amount of fame, a certain amount of compassion, and a lot of self-centeredness. But you have all these qualities, you have all of these attributes, all of these strengths of different types. But when they're applied simply to material activities, there's no hope, there's no future. Everything is ultimately taken away at death. And because you've had to injure so many other living entities and maintain in this body. You've gained so much bad karma that you're going to have to suffer so many different ways. So in that sense, all of these different attributes and qualities you have are like so many zeros because there's no net gain. They don't really help you in any way. Matter of fact, they tend to hurt you because the longer you live in this world, the more suffering you commit to other living entities, the more you have to come back and suffer to atone for that. However, if you take those exact same activities and place the one of Krishna in front of those activities, those characteristics, those qualities, those attributes, then suddenly all those zeros have some actual meaning. And instead of binding you to the material world, they become transcendental activities that not only do not bind you to the world, but they also purify your heart, purify your consciousness, and actually elevate you to a point of actually being able to come to what Krishna says, living in an actual joyous state. My granddaughter is 5 years old, and she was talking to my daughter just the other day, and she was asking, I forget exactly how it came up, but she was asking why there was suffering in the world, basically. And my daughter explained that, that's the way Krishna made the world. This world is a place of suffering, and by going through this suffering, then you learn that it's not your real home, and then you will want to go back to Krishna. And my daughter says, well, then I don't love Krishna anymore because he's mean to people. And she's very intelligent for a 5-year-old. So then my daughters explained, no, it's not like Krishna's being mean to you. It's because you have your karma. It's because you've done all these different things that hurt other living entities, and now you're just getting the result of that. But we have that tendency. We have that tendency to want to blame somebody else for our miseries. We have that tendency to want to blame others for our suffering. We think that I'm not happy because so-and-so did this or so-and-so did that. But in actuality, any unhappiness we have in this life is due exclusively to our own choices that we've made. Because we've chosen to turn our back on the beautiful sunshine of Krishna. Now we're looking at our shadow. We're living in darkness. We're living in ignorance. And out of that ignorance, we're causing so much suffering to other living entities and thus to ourselves. But if we simply turn around and face the light, then instantly our life is different. So this is Sankhya Yoga. Sankhya Yoga is actually understanding, it's the science of understanding things as they actually are. Understanding what is to be done, what is not to be done. Krishna will allow you to do anything because choice, freedom of choice, free will is required for loving relationships. So you can choose to remain wandering and squandering your time in this material world for as long as you like. But you should know it's all due to your choice. Krishna doesn't want you to be here. Krishna is not some sadist Like my friend, so-called friend, Frank Eidelbach, when I was growing up, I was first, second, third grades. He lived in my neighborhood. He was the kind of guy who just delighted in doing things like taking a magnifying glass and burning ants as they were just going about their business, and pulling the legs off grasshoppers, and drowning cats in a bucket of water just to watch them die. And no, this is not Krishna. Krishna is not a sadist. Krishna is not a masochist. Krishna is the source of all love, and he wants you to be happy. So he is speaking the Bhagavad Gita, and he continues, verse 2, what is called renunciation is the same as yoga, or linking oneself with the Supreme. So this is the actual definition of yoga, linking oneself with the Supreme. Now, in reality, we are eternally linked with Krishna. We cannot be separated from Krishna. Just like the light cannot be separated from the sunshine. You can't have the sun without having the sunlight. They're eternally related, just like wetness and water. We've spoken about this before. But due to Maya, which literally means this is not, we're in the illusion that we're separate from Krishna. So, is the same as yoga, or linking oneself with the Supreme. For no one can become a yogi unless he renounces the desire for sense gratification. Pretty tall order, actually. Renouncing the desire for sense gratification. What? What do you mean? Renounce the desire to be, because if we're relating to ourselves as this body, then we're thinking, oh, if I renounce the desire for sense gratification, then I've renounced the desire for happiness. I've renounced the desire for joy. Because after all, the only joy I know in this world comes from what? Satisfying the senses. Some little tongue flash here, some little sight flash over there. Someone giving me some praise, some adoration, some respect. We're thinking, without these things, what do I have? I have nothing. How can I continue to live without this? What's the point of life without sense gratification? But you're not the body. And all these desires that you actually have that manifest themselves as desires for sense gratification are actually stemming from spiritual desires. The desires to love and be loved on a spiritual level. And there are transcendental senses. But the satisfaction of the transcendental senses results in a real happiness, a happiness that actually satisfies you, the spirit soul, not these temporary little sense flashes that, when they're done, leave you unsatisfied and worse off than you were before. Charidas referred to one in one of his talks. He was referred to a study that was done. There's all these people that are addicted to nicotine, smoking cigarettes, right? And they get to a point where they've got to have a cigarette. They're shaking, and they're just losing it, right? They've got to have a smoke. So these guys, they set up this test where they took this little round circle, and they hooked it up to an electrode, and they took this other steel bar with a little ball on it that just barely fits. That ball barely fits through that little circle without touching it. And they say, okay, and every time that ball touches the outer ring, it completes the electronic circuit and registers on a graph. And so these guys is dying for a cigarette. They, okay, take this thing and try to hold it inside that circle without letting it touch the edge. And we see how steady your hand is and how steady your nerves are, and how this is a reflection of how calm and peaceful you actually are inside. And they're sitting there and they're trying to do it, and their hand is, and they're making all this contact with the thing, and the chart's going up and down, or whatever. They go, okay, that's done. Now here, go smoke your cigarette and come back and we'll do it again. So they go out, they smoke their cigarette. I've had my nicotine fix, I'm good now. They come back down, they take the little thing, they stick it back in the thing, and far worse than it was before. Because now their body is all agitated by this rush of nicotine. And so they're doing something to try to achieve some sense of calm, some sense of peace, and instead they end up just agitating themselves even more than they were before. And this is the nature of sense gratification. The more you do something to try to find satisfaction in it, the more you just become agitated. And the more that you strive and strive. We've spoken before about how all the 3 stages of anxiety. First, you're in anxiety because, here's something and I don't think I'll be able to get it. I don't know if I'll be able to get it. I know I want it, but I don't know if I can get it. Somehow or another, I've achieved it. Now what? Now I'm in anxiety because either it's consumable and I'm going to finish and it's going to be gone, or it's going to be stolen from me, or it's going to break down and disappear. Anyway, somehow or another it's going to be lost. So you're in anxiety that, how do I keep this from being lost? Or how do I make this experience last longer? So I eat my ice cream with a tiny little spoon, one little bite at a time, so it'll last longer. And what's the result? Brain freeze, right? And then you got the sugar rush with the crash afterwards, right? Didn't work. Here I'm thinking, I eat my ice cream and I'll be satisfied. No. You eat your ice cream, you get this little sugar rush, but ultimately it doesn't satisfy. But if instead we take our pleasure in offering this ice cream to Krishna, we seek our pleasure in serving Krishna, making things nice for Krishna, making things nice for Krishna's devotees. Then we actually taste some real pleasure. So one can actually come to the point of seeing the point of renouncing sense gratification, the desire for sense gratification. Because one who's in knowledge understands that this sense gratification is not going to give me the happiness that I'm seeking, but it's just the opposite. It's actually going to take me further away from that which is actually going to satisfy me. For one who is a neophyte in the eightfold yoga systems, work is said to be the means. And for one who has already attained to yoga, cessation of all material activities is said to be the means. So this is referring, I'm not an expert in the eightfold yoga mystic system that was delineated by Patanjali. Acharya has a series of lectures out about it. If you find yourself interested in it, I recommend you take a look at that series. He goes into depth about talking about all that. But because we are all individuals, we will always eternally be individuals, we're all have our individual relationship with Krishna, and we're all in our different stages of perfection of that relationship. And there's different flavors in spiritual relationships. So some people want to relate to Krishna as master and servant. Others want to relate to Krishna as a friend. Others want to relate to Krishna as in the mood of a parent. Others want to relate to Krishna in the conjugal affairs. And still others, they don't want to have that kind of personal relationship. They want to just be surrounded and lost in the essence of Krishna. And this is the impersonal Brahma Jyoti. The Brahma Jyoti is the spiritual effulgence that comes off Krishna. It's compared to being like the brilliant sunshine. And there's just these unlimited little photons, spiritual sparks. And you're merged in there. And in that state of being merged in the Brahma Jyoti, there is the absence of all fear. There is the absence of all anxiety. There is the absence of all desires for gain and safety. And there is much more satisfaction in that relationship with Krishna than in any material relationship that can be. And so many people are attracted to that concept. However, because that relationship is not personal, and we are persons, that ultimately does not satisfy the soul either. And eventually one will be forced, due to the desires to relate and actually love, and love means serve, one will actually have to leave the Brahma Jyoti and again return to the material world to seek out that higher sense of happiness that comes from these other relationships. So when you're in those, the nice thing about bhakti yoga is that not only is work the means, right? We're working for Krishna. But when you attain love for Krishna, you continue to work for Krishna. And that work is no longer the means to attain Krishna, but it's the result of attaining love for Krishna. So the means becomes the end. They're one and the same. Whereas with the Eightfold Mystic, when you're trying to reach the impersonal Brahman, you're working, you're doing all these different things to try to achieve this goal. And then once you achieve that goal, you no longer have to do those things. You no longer have to sit on your kusa bed with your soft cloth, staring at the tip of the nose, controlling the breath, controlling the mind, da-da-da, da-da-da. No, that's all finished, right? Because now you're just relaxed and floating in the Brahma Jyoti. Engulfed in Krishna's presence. So you've given up all that work. But for the devotee, he enjoys doing things for Krishna. He loves doing things for Krishna. He finds his greatest happiness in doing things for Krishna. So there's no need to a cessation of work. It's the perfect process of yoga. A person is said to have thus attained yoga when, having renounced all material desires, he neither acts for sense gratification nor engages in fruitive activities. Renounced all material desires and neither acts for sense gratification or engages in fruitive activities. And this is all accomplished by simply focusing our attention on serving Krishna. So every morning, Krishnadasi and I, we have our routine. We get up at 4:30 and we do an hour and a half of japa. And we'll listen to a lecture for an hour. And then we bathe, and then we make breakfast for Krishna, you know. And it's so nice. Oh, preparing this and meditating on Krishna while you're making his breakfast and cutting things up and making them and decorating them on the plate, making it all nice and attractive, and then taking it, waking Krishna up, touching his feet. Wake up, Krishna, it's time for breakfast, you know? Going out before and picking flowers and then offering those flowers to Krishna and see how beautiful they become when they're decorated on his altar. Offering him, Sri, please accept this insignificant offering. Chanting to him, offering incense, offering flowers. Reading to him, about him afterwards. Chanting a little bit more. And then honoring prasadam, you know. It's just all one wonderful meditation on Krishna. When you're seeing everything is in relation to Krishna. You're preparing this food and you're thinking, this food is impossible to produce without Krishna. Krishna is the source of all this stuff. It's the source of the sun, the moon, the air, the water. None of this could be had without Krishna's mercy. So let me take this, prepare it in a way that it'll be nice for Krishna. And you find that by doing all this, that actually just the act of the offering and the preparation is, if not equal to the experience of honoring that prasadam, just the preparation and the offering of it is actually just as nicer than the eating of the prasadam. This is the beauty of bhakti yoga. But in order to do this, what's the process? A man must elevate himself by his own mind, not degrade himself. The mind is the friend of the conditioned soul and his enemy as well. So what's the difference? When you use your mind to try to think of, how can I serve Krishna nicely? Your mind is your greatest friend. But if you listen to your mind, it's too cold. It's too dark. I don't want to get up. I'll just sleep in today. I'm not going to do my japa today. And then you finally do wake up and, I got to get to work. No time to make an offering to Krishna today. Just throw some cereal in a bowl and wolf it down and out the door, right? And you go and you work, and you find that you've spent the whole day never once thinking about Krishna, much less dedicating every action to Krishna. In this case, your mind has become your worst enemy. For him who has conquered the mind is the best of friends. For one who has failed to do so, his very mind will be the greatest enemy. For one who has conquered the mind, the supersoul is already reached, for he has attained tranquility. To such a man, happiness and distress, heat and cold, honor and dishonor are all the same. Now, to some people could think that's pretty boring, right? Happiness and distress, heat and cold, honor, they're all the same. Where's the fun in that? Right? Everything's the same. If I talk in a monotone, it is very difficult to listen to after a very short time. Nobody likes everything to be the same all the time. Same is boring. But no, that's not what he's referring to. It's the same because you see that it has no real connection with you, the spirit soul. You're still experiencing these things. You're still experiencing heat. You're still experiencing cold. You're still experiencing happiness and distress in the material level. But it's not touching you, the soul, and you know it's not. And because you have that higher connection with Krishna, you have that relationship. It's like we talked about that time. The actor who's on the set in his soap opera that he's acting in. He's given the script for the day, and oh, this and this and this happened to me. Oh, I've been in I've got cancer. I'm dying of pancreatic cancer. I've only got 3 months to live. And on screen, he's devastated. He's so sad or whatever. But the actor himself, I don't have cancer. I'm not worried about that. Has no real effect on his real life. So in the same way, all these things are coming and going in our material life. But because we understand that I am not this body, I am not this ego, this false ego. I am the pure, eternal, loving servant of Krishna. All this other stuff is just background noise. And yes, it's there and I acknowledge it and I deal with it, but it has no real impact on my real life. A person is said to be established in self-realization and is called a yogi when he is fully satisfied by virtue of acquired knowledge and realization. Such a person is situated in transcendence and is self-controlled. He sees everything, whether it be pebbles, stones, or gold, as the same. A person is said to be still further advanced when he regards all, the honest well-wisher, friends and enemies, the envious, the pious, the sinner, and those who are indifferent and impartial with an equal mind. A transcendental should always try to concentrate his mind on the super self, Krishna. He should live alone in a secluded place and should always carefully control his mind. So how is this practical? How do we live in a secluded place in this day and age? It's practically speaking impossible. I mean, yeah, Yolanda lives out in the high desert and there's just all kinds of sagebrush around her. You can wander out in the desert and hang out with the rattlesnakes a bit. But that's not really the answer. Not really the answer because most of us don't have that kind of situation anyway. When I was living on Oahu, most of the lots are like between, 5,000 square feet, 10,000 square feet. It's a big lot. Houses are built 5 feet off the border lines or property lines. And that's if you're actually living in a house instead of a condo or an apartment complex. There's people everywhere. Traffic everywhere. Starts at 4 o'clock in the morning. How can one do that? How do you get a secluded place? This secluded place is actually a mental state. It actually comes from detaching oneself from material desires by realizing that they're not me. I am not my desires. These desires come and go, just as all these different thoughts come and go out of my brain, my mind. But if you simply sit there and watch, you'll see these things come in and they go out. In one ear, out the other. So all these desires are like that as well. So even though you may be living in New Delhi, in a slum with 6 million people in the city with you, you can actually live in a secluded place. You simply take your charter and you pull it over your head, make your little space. Tune everything else out. You meditate on Krishna within your heart. you don't have much to offer on a material level, but you can meditate. You can offer things in meditation to Krishna. There's this wonderful story of this yogi. He was a devotee, and he wanted to offer Krishna some sweet rice. I don't know if you guys are all familiar with sweet rice, but to make sweet rice, you get nice rice, usually a short grain rice instead of a long grain rice because it plumps up better. And you slowly cook it in milk and add sugar. And you cook it and cook it, cook till the milk gets condensed down. So it's this rich, very thick, kind of like almost like a rice pudding, but not quite that thick. And it's best served cold. The colder the better. And it's nice if you can put some kind of fruit into it, mango or strawberries or blueberries and things like this. So, but this guy's just living out in this forest and he's got no facility. So, but he, through meditation, he goes through the whole process of getting the rice and getting the pot and building the fire, cooking the rice. And when you're cooking milk, you have to constantly stir it until it boils. Otherwise, it'll stick on the bottom and burn. And once it burns, it's no good. It just tastes like burnt milk. So he's sitting there in meditation, and he's just constantly, he's making this sweet rice, and he's stirring it nicely, and he's stirring it, and then it's done. It's cooked down to the right level, and then he wants to offer it, but he's got to let it cool. So he takes it, he's got it in an earthen pot, and he puts it in the river and lets it cool off. And so then he wants to know if it's cool enough that he can offer it, because he doesn't want to offer hot sweet rice to Krishna, especially if it's too hot. He doesn't want to burn his mouth. So in meditation, he goes and touches the sweet rice to see if it's cool enough to offer yet. But it's not. And it's still really hot, and it burns his finger. And it breaks his meditation. And he looks at his hand, and his hand is actually red from the hot sweet rice that he touched. So we can, and there's the other example of the devotee of Lord Chaitanya. Lord Chaitanya was going to Vrindavan, and he had to go through the Jalikanda forest. And it's just this little path through the forest. And so this devotee, he sat in meditation every day and meditated on making a path for Lord Chaitanya through the forest. And he decorated the path with flowers and fruit trees and all these nice things, so Lord Chaitanya could have a nice, pleasant journey through the Jalikanda forest. And because of his meditation, like this, Lord Chaitanya actually experienced that reality. So there's no material limitation to serving Krishna. You may think, oh, I have very little to offer, right? But no, you can offer Krishna through meditation. You can offer Krishna anything. And you'll find that it's actually more important because Krishna explains, one can offer me with love and devotion, a leaf, a fruit, a little water, and I will accept it. Does Krishna want a leaf, a little fruit, a little water? No. Krishna is accepting the love that it's offered with. So this is the actual key to renunciation, is developing, cultivating this actual, real, one-on-one, personal relationship with God. This is what the Bhagavad-gita is all about. Yes, you're going to have your life. Yes, you're going to have all these responsibilities. Yes, there's going to be all this stuff going on externally. But that doesn't have to have any real impact on your eternal life, which is your life with Krishna and your spiritual master. And in such a state of consciousness, then A person is said to be still further advanced when he regards all, the honest well-wisher, friends and enemies, the envious, the pious, the sinner, and those who are indifferent, with an impartial and equal mind. And then Krishna goes on to explain, go in a secluded place, you sit in this way, you do the kusa grass thing, and you stare at the tip of the nose. And what does Arjuna say? Says, Krishna, are you serious? I can't do that. Arjuna's not some wimp. Arjuna is a very powerful Kshatriya. And very powerful Kshatriya means that he has control over his mind and senses. You have to. You know, the Kshatriyas of Arjuna's time, they didn't just shoot arrows at each other. They would shoot an arrow, but before they would shoot the arrow, they would chant these mantras. And these mantras, because this actual material world is actually built on sound vibration. And by proper manipulation of sound vibration, one can cause all kinds of amazing things to happen. So they would have these arrows and they would chant these mantras, and this weapon, this arrow would now become a fire weapon, or it would become a water weapon, or it would have this effect or that effect. And so they had all these mystic weapons that they would fire, attack each other with, that were due to this very elevated manipulation of the subtle material energy. And this is not an easy feat to do it. It requires great determination, great control, all these kind of things. Yet when Arjuna hears this process of meditation that Krishna explains, he goes, wow, I don't think I can do that, Krishna. What does Krishna say? Arjuna says, "Oh Madhusudan, the system of yoga which you have summarized appears impractical and unendurable for me, for the mind is restless and unsteady. For the mind is restless, turbulent, obstinate, and very strong, O Krishna. And to subdue it, it seems to me, more difficult than controlling the wind." And it does seem this way sometimes, right? When your mind is sitting there hammering away at you, these desires are so insistent. I've got to have this. I've got to have it now. No, you don't. You'll be fine without it, 99.9% of the time. Blessed Lord said, "O mighty armed son of Kunti, it is undoubtedly very difficult to curb the restless mind, but it is possible by constant practice and by detachment." So what is this constant practice? This constant practice is cultivating this practice of seeing things as they really are. Seeing that this is actually Krishna's energy. This body is Krishna's energy. I didn't create this body. My parents didn't even create this body. I didn't create the food that maintains this body. I didn't create the air that sustains this body. I didn't create the water. All these things are created. All these things are gifts of Krishna. So by constantly remembering, oh, this is related to Krishna. This is Krishna's. Let me use it in his service. Cultivating this detached attitude, just like the bank teller. The bank teller all day long, what happens to the bank teller? People come in and give them money, right? If they start thinking, oh, this is very nice. I sit here in this chair, all these people come in and hand me money. If they start to think that that money is theirs, what happens? They end up in jail. They get punished. But if they are intelligent, they realize, oh, this money is not mine. I'm simply being the caretaker of this money, taking it and put it in this safe place for the real owner to use later when they need it, right? So if we see the world, practice seeing the world in this way. Oh, everything in this world is actually Krishna's. Nothing is mine. The only thing I really possess is my love. Where I place my love, that is my only real power. So let me practice placing my love on Krishna. So this constant practice of seeing things as they actually are is what allows one to control the mind. When the mind starts making all these demands and desires flood you from this way and that way, like Krishna explained, gave the example of the ocean being constantly filled by countless numbers of rivers flowing into it. But yet, the ocean remains calm. So you've got all these senses. You've got the sense of hearing, the sense of sight, the sense of touch, the sense of smell. All these senses are reporting all this stuff coming in at you, all this, creating all these material reactions, creating all these material desires. But if we simply practice seeing things as they actually are, oh, this is not mine. This will not satisfy me, the soul. But if I simply take this energy and engage it in Krishna's service, that does satisfy me. That does satisfy the soul. One can actually come to the point of being able to control the mind. For one whose mind is unbridled, self-realization is difficult work. But for one whose mind is controlled and who strives by right means, which we just described, is assured of success. That is my opinion. So this is Krishna's opinion, that if you simply take this process, apply it in your life, and it's a very nice process. It's so wonderful to see everything in relation to Krishna. Use everything in Krishna's service. You no longer have to be in anxiety about getting this and losing that and lamenting over it after it's lost. That's not your business anymore. What is your business? Your business is to having a personal relationship with the most wonderful person that ever existed and ever will exist. This is the opportunity that you're being given. But Arjuna is still not convinced. Arjuna said, what is the destination of the man of faith who does not persevere, who in the beginning takes to the process of self-realization, but who later desists due to worldly mindedness and thus does not attain perfection in mysticism? O mighty armed Krishna, does not such a man, deviated from the path of transcendence, perish like a riven cloud with no position in any sphere? This is my doubt, O Krishna, and I ask you to dispel it completely. But for yourself, no one is to be found who can destroy this doubt. So Krishna has placed Arjuna in this position of asking these questions, not because Arjuna really has these doubts. Arjuna is a surrendered soul to Krishna. Arjuna is Krishna's friend, relating to Krishna on a very personal level. But he's asking these questions for our benefit, because we see It happens all the time to people. They come, they hear about this process of devotional service. They hear about bhakti yoga. They start to apply it in their life. But they're not always successful. If you're not serious, if you're not applying this process, I mean, it is a process. It is a process. Just like I say, I've got my little routine. I get up at the same time every morning, 7 days a week. I've got my schedule. Now it's my japa time. Now it's this lecture time. Now it's time to bathe the body, maintain the body. Now it's the time to cook for Krishna. Now I go and I work for Krishna. Oh, now it's time to stop and offer lunch to Krishna and have lunch with Krishna. Now I go back and work another 4 or 5 hours for Krishna. Now let me go find some friends and we sit and we chant together. And we hear more about Krishna. And then we put Krishna to bed at night. Right? It's a process. It's full of rituals. It's full of discipline. Right? My daughter goes, "You're so boring. You never do anything spontaneous," right? She likes to decide when she gets up, oh, what am I going to do today? You know, go do this thing, or this wonderful thing, or that wonderful thing. You go to do this wonderful thing, that wonderful thing, you're always disappointed. Like, oh, I'll go to the beach. And you get to the beach and it's windy. And the sand is blowing in your face and getting into all your food. And you go out in the water and you get stung by a man-o-war. And it's crowded and the people are making noise and they're smoking cigarettes. And it's not what you imagined in your mind. Reality bites, as they say. But if one does not take this process and apply it, then there's every chance of being taken away by the mind. Every chance. So it's very important that we develop these bhakti, or this sadhana bhakti means bhakti in practice. In our conditioned state of life, in our contaminated state of consciousness, we don't feel Krishna's presence. We're chanting Krishna's name, but we're not feeling any joy or bliss from chanting Krishna's name. It's just something we're doing out of obligation. We've taken some vow to chant, oh, I will chant this many mantras a day. But in the beginning, there's no taste there. So we do it out of determination, out of faith in Krishna's instructions that if I do this, it will give me the desired result. But in this last 45 years that I've been doing this, I've unfortunately seen so many people, they come to this process and they take it up for some time, but due to worldly mindedness, because they don't take advantage of all the different tools that they're given by Krishna and their spiritual master, that Maya takes them away. But being a transcendentalist is not easy. It's like going surfing without getting wet. We've given that example before. You're diving into the ocean. You got this tiny little piece of fiberglass that you're going to try to stand on and keep out of the water on. It's amazing. I was having to go to Maui to do work over there, and my friend Krishna Japadas he's a kite surfer. And you see these guys are the kite surfers. They got this big, huge kite. They got this little kite board, and they put out their stuff and they pump up their kite and they hook up all the strings, and they just walk over to the beach and they drop their board, their little board down. They step into it, boom. They're out in the water and they're just skimming the surface and doing flips and all this kind of stuff. And they'll be out there for hours and they'll come back and they never got wet, except little splash, splashes here and there, right? Because they're expert in the process. Me, I try to go out there, but if one's not expert, if one doesn't follow the process, one doesn't learn how to do all that, you get pummeled by the waves. You're just constantly being drug around by this kite and almost drowning and, stuck out hundreds of yards offshore. Or you go to launch your kite and all of a sudden the gust of wind takes you 300 feet up in the air and drops you down on the street. You get tangled up in the trees. It can be a disaster. So you have to do it right. But what if you don't do it right? What if you get carried away by your mind? What if Maya takes you away? Krishna says, still, there is no loss nor diminution. For one who has done good, he is never overcome by evil. He'll explain later that the slightest amount of advancement made in this process protects one from the greatest fear. What is that greatest fear? Descending back down into animal life. Because only in this human form of life do you have the advanced stage of consciousness where you can actually try to make a solution to your suffering condition of birth, death, old age, and disease. But if one simply lives a life of eating, sleeping, mating, and defending, this is animal life. This is not human life. One will be given a suitable animal body to live that kind of life. In this human form of life, it's very difficult to enjoy eating. You have to go through so much endeavor, getting these nice foodstuffs, putting them together, cooking them in such a way, or getting enough money to go to a restaurant, to buy them, whatever. Then you have to eat just enough, not too much, not too little, or you'll mess up your enjoyment. So many things like that. But Krishna says, no. You can enjoy. If you want to enjoy eating, take the body of a pig. Pigs enjoy eating almost anything, to any amount of it. You ever been to a pig farm when they feed the pigs? The squealing is deafening. They're so excited to eat all this slop, all this half decomposed produce and stuff like that. They're just in ecstasy. So if you want to follow the tongue, be a pig. You'd be much happier. If you're into sex life, be a pigeon. Pigeons can have 16 times an hour, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. So this human form of life is meant for self-realization. So what is the greatest fear? Is that I'll be taken back down into animal life, have to go through that whole evolutionary process of this species, that species. So finally I can get back to the human form of life. So I have a chance to, again, somehow or another, get out of this cycle. But if you engage in this process of serving Krishna, developing this relationship with Krishna, even if you get taken away by the mind and you fall back down into material consciousness, what is the result? What does Krishna say? The unsuccessful yogi, after many, many years of enjoyment on the planets of the pious living entities, is born into a family of righteous people or into a family of rich aristocracy. Or he takes birth in a family of transcendentalists who are surely great in wisdom. Verily, such a birth is rare in this world. On taking such a birth, he again revives the divine consciousness of his previous life, and he tries to make further progress in order to achieve complete success, O son of Kunti. By virtue of the divine consciousness of his previous life, he automatically becomes attracted to the yogic principles even without seeking them. Such an inquisitive transcendentalist striving for yoga stands always above the ritualistic principles of the scriptures. When the yogi engages himself with sincere endeavor in making further progress, being washed of all contaminations, then ultimately, after many, many births of practice, he attains the supreme goal. So, there is no loss in serving Krishna. There's only gain. So even if you have just a small desire, take advantage of that desire. Cultivate it. Treat it like this small little flame that you're trying to build into a nice fire. Add fuel to it. Fan it. Fan those flames of devotion. And you'll find that you can attain success in this very same life. There's no need to take many, many births. Simply give your love to Krishna. Simply accept Krishna's love. Put yourself in a situation where you can always remember things as they actually are. You can see things as they are. Where you can see things in relation to Krishna. Make friends with other people who are doing the same thing. Hear from Krishna in the form of scripture. Hear about Krishna from his devotees. As things happen in your life, look at them in relation to Krishna. And you'll find, what was the final thing? And of all yogis, he who abides in me with great faith, worshiping me in transcendental loving service, is most intimately united with me in yoga and is the highest of all. So therefore, be a yogi. Thank you very much for the opportunity to spend some time remembering Krishna with you and reading this wonderful Bhagavad-gita. And as always, we're just skimming the surface here. There's so much more that's contained in the purports by Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Over the next week, go back, reread these verses, read the purports, meditating on them through the day, and actually make your life a spiritual life. Not just a superficial thing. Because the only person you cheat is yourself. Krishna's not saying, worship me because he's a megalomaniac. He's saying, worship me because he knows that that's the only way you're going to actually be happy. Because that's your actual position. That's your actual nature. By rendering loving devotional service. What's wrong with being in a loving relationship? Well, if you're in a loving relationship with a materialist, you're in trouble because you're going to get smashed. But if you're in a loving relationship with Krishna and Krishna's devotees, then you're going to find your life becomes very wonderful. So continue to have too many people in a small room chanting Krishna's names, and you'll find your life becomes very sweet. Thank you again. Haribol. We'll chant for a few minutes. Haribo. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Bhakti Sira Swarupananda Paramahansa Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Bhakti Sira Swarupananda Aja Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Bhakta Aja Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Bhakta Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama Rama Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama Rama Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama Rama Hare Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama Rama Hare Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama Rama Hare Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama Hare Jaya Jaya Jiva Prabhupada Jaya Jaya Gurudev Jaya Jaya Srila Prabhupada. Jaya Jaya Srila Prabhupada. Jaya Jaya Guru Jaya. Jaya Jaya Srila Prabhupada. Jaya Jaya. Hare Krishna, Hare Bol.